Chapter 8 Trimidoc. Awake! They are here! More troops have come! An elven boy dashed in shouting and disappeared inside the cave. Esmeralda and Nezha were making their way from the south. Everyone awoke, armed up, and set out. When they got there was close to 100 soldiers on land. They rushed into battle. Jack was armed with a short sword and a bow. Esmeralda had put fairy medicine into Farisef's wound, but he stayed grounded. Look, there's Nezha! The wizards joined each other in a circle. Tolan had his eyes set on Trillium. She was the cause of all this. Tolan led the charge of his new army. He screamed, holding up his sword, using all of the power he had left. They all charged. Farisef began fighting them off. He looked for Trillium when the coast was clear. He was worried about her protection, but there were those two goofballs from Drake. He was happy. A dark cloud moved towards them. Feathers were screwed! Just as they were coming to land, a great wind swept them up and forced them into the sea like helpless moths. The Adrella began to attack them. Before they could make any sense of it, Farisef saw a lone man flying towards him. "Father!" he screamed. He began to weep tears of joy. The king of Josephera landed. The wizards all hailed him. He was battered and worn, but his spirit soared like never before. His will was bright and alive. Farisef smiled, hugged him, and kissed his dirty cheeks. How? Later. Let's waste them first. The wizards were all together now, wiping these guys out in amazing time. Tolan crept up behind Esmeralda, who hung farther away from the rest. He seized her. She screamed and gathered the attention from the rest. "Hand over my daughter now, or she dies," Tolan demanded. Nezha looked at Jasha, who nodded. "Jack, get Nemi." Nezha threw him the key. When they returned, Nemi was without restraints. "Father, let her go." "Have you lost your mind, child?" "Join us, Father. This is your last chance at redemption. Our guild has fallen." "They killed your mother and your sister, Nemi." "I will not fight for you or against you, Father." Tolan's face heated up. In his rage, he killed the fairy queen. "You bastard! You're mine!" Jasha yelled. She raised her bow and aimed between his eyes. They heard screaming as troops began to run out from the trees in a giant stampede. The wizards stood still and confused, and then they saw it. A giant dragon made of flames came over the trees. "Trimidoc!" Nezha screamed. "Run for shelter!" They began to scatter. The giant dragon had his mind set on only one creature at this time. He swooped down and snatched Tolan in his mouth. He shook him around like a rag doll and swallowed him whole. Lar rode upon his back. His laughter echoed through the plains. "Father!" Nemi screamed. Jack held her. Trimidoc torched mixed troops, favoring no one of any race. He flew around, gathering them together in a circle. They held each other, took their last looks, and felt their last embraces before the dragon cooked them all into a cinder. Just as the fire dragon closed in on the wizards, a pure bright light opened from the sky, turning everyone's attention. Trimidoc swerved to avoid the light and almost threw Lar off. Then came forth another man who rode upon a white Pegasus. "What is that?" Kai asked. "It looks just like ivory, but there's only one, right?" Trillium asked her mother. "No, there was one more, a stallion, but he disappeared many summers ago. We assumed he died." "That's him! That's the one who stole my amulet! That's Jensen!" the child exclaimed. Trimidoc reeled and came at Jensen. Fire billowed from his giant mouth, but Jensen dodged it. The blue light that surrounded him made it hard for the dragon to see. When he got close, the dragon was blinded. Trimidoc blew flames in a rage. Jensen misjudged his angle, and the Pegasus was singed on the left side by a gust of fire. Trimidoc dove at the crowd in anger, nailing over 40 mixed soldiers. They fired from the ground but could not harm the dragon. Jensen lured him higher, and when Lar followed, he dove and turned, kicking the dragon's rear. Only the flames from the mouth could harm his horse. Lar held up the eye, which cast a terrible light at Jensen, because Lar was now its master. The Pegasus was thrown off by it and fell towards the water. King Jonathan summoned the wind, which picked up his wings and made him stable again. Jensen held up his hand, and a beam danced out of it. None of the wizards had used this power in many summers. Each one of them held up a hand, sending all of their power through it. It created one beam that they sent at Lar. He held up the eye to catch it, and when it hit the eye, it backfired and each wizard got hit by their reverse power, knocking all of them unconscious. Mutt stood alone, helpless, as Trimidoc came for him. This was it. It was over. They had no defense now. Mutt, in his helplessness, grabbed Trillium's bow from her limp arms and raised it. His arms shook nervously. He prayed to the spirit warriors and took his only shot. He let the arrow fly and closed his eyes, awaiting certain death. A loud hiss made him open them again. The dragon had fallen into the sea. And whether or not it was his shot that killed Lar, the Adrella finished him off. Trillium woke up in a bed with unusual surroundings. Farisef smiled at her. "What happened?" "Quite a lot, dear. Get dressed. We have council." Trillium dressed and met up with the others in the council room of Phadia. She smiled. Everyone was there, and Farisef had his father back again. She saw the old woman who had worn the horned helmet. Now she was cleaned up and dressed to the hilt. "Do I know you?" she asked the old woman. "I'm your grandmother, Trillium." "We thought you were dead, along with the others." She glanced at her mother. "I was a slave, but made a crafty escape, thanks to Jack." Trillium hugged and kissed her, not embarrassed at all by her tears. She then turned to Jack. "Thank you." She bowed at him and he winked. "Oh no!" Trillium jumped. They all looked at her. "I forgot about Zeed." Jasha laughed. "It's okay. He got out." "How?" "Do you expect someone of your blood and stubborn will to stay put?" Trillium shrugged. Jasha continued. "He was there when Trimidoc fell. He was the one who returned the eye to us." Trillium sighed and Nemi walked in. "What's she doing here?" Trillium whispered. "She belongs with us now. She belongs with me," Jack boldly answered. Nemi smiled, took Jack's hand and sat down. The rest seated. "So what happened?" Trillium asked. Nezha spoke. "When all of us made the beam, it backfired off of the eye, knocking all of us out and putting us under a spell. Only one remained to rise against Lar." "Nemi?" she guessed. "Jack shot your bow, striking Lar and bringing them both down into the sea." "What happened to Jensen?" The room became quiet. She turned to see Jensen walking in. He was dressed in a long black and gold robe. He was still the most intriguing man she had ever seen. "I started the beam which backfired, knocking my horse and I from the sky. He is the only male left, and thanks to the Adrella we were both saved. If it weren't for the man who calls himself Jack, we all would have perished. Reward this man's bravery. This belongs to you." He handed her the amulet and took his seat among them. Trillium looked at him with unease. "Why did you take it? Who the hell are you anyway?" "I had no choice. The war was getting closer, and initiating it was the only way to draw out the one who calls himself Lar. You see, this war is between us, and I had to bring him forth." "You have no quarrel with the wizards, so you said, but you almost had us killed." "What do you know about Lar?" "He is my brother. We are princes of Ortso." "I'm sorry for the trouble I caused your kingdom, Jensen. Please do not turn me into your father. I nearly escaped him, and it would mean my death," Jonathan pleaded. "Do not worry. It was his mistress you had stolen. I don't care much for him anyway." Jonathan could breathe again. "Lar was jealous because I am the eldest and the one to take the throne after my father passes. I was deeply in love with my wife. He spelled her away from me, and she died in Phadia during the fire. He fled, knowing I would avenge her death." "I'm sorry, Jensen. I believe it was I that had killed her. She was killing my kind. I didn't know anything else," Jasha admitted. "I do not blame you, lady. I blame only him. He took what I loved the most away from me. He did it on purpose." "I'm sorry, too," Trillium apologized. "Don't be. She still lives within me, and my real name is Duran." The wizards were shocked, especially Jasha and Trillium, who had known him personally for many summers. "Lar turned me into an owl the first time I encountered him. I was only recently able to break the spell. I'm sorry for my secrecy. I meant no harm to you. I couldn't let anyone interfere with my plans." "We're just glad you showed up when you did. The eye is returned and our threat is diminished." Jasha thanked him. "What will happen now?" Trillium asked. Nezha answered. We can rebuild again. Serenity will reclaim her throne in Phadia. Jasha and I will lead our council. Phariseph and Zach will join us as well. Jack will join us as well. And me? The child asked. I want you to travel with me and the spirit warriors to help balance out the new Haven Bell. Phariseph instantly grabbed her hand and looked at her with eager eyes. She nodded silently. In 3 days we will hold a festival here for Esmeralda and our fallen friends. You have until then to decide. What about us? Kai asked. We can't go back to Drake after leaving. They'll never let us back in. That will be revealed as well. I will see you all in 3 days. Hail Serenity's return, and hail the council. Duran bowed and left. They dispersed. Trillium took some time to visit with her family, as did Phariseph. They both agreed to meet at sunset. They met upon the shore of Phadia. Trillium walked up to him and sat down. This is so great and terrible at the same time. Bittersweet. Haven Bell is safe and my father has returned. I have everything I want except the thing I want the most. Phariseph, I have so much yet to accomplish. I have to fulfill my title and do as much for Haven Bell as I can. You are very sweet, Phariseph, and I do love you. There's never been a marriage between 2 races before. Nor has there ever been a half-breed either. He took a deep breath and smiled. You still have 3 days, and whichever you choose, I am your friend always. I just want you to be safe and happy. Thank you. There as the sun set upon the horizon, they shared an unforgettable kiss. On the 3rd day, Trillium woke up to pesky maidens who were more excited than she was. They dressed her up in a beautiful elven dress full of deep purples, fuchsias, a golden sash, and fancy designs. She realized at this moment what a woman she had really become. She had worn all of her outfits to rags. The first time she could remember wearing a dress was in Josephera, and what a riot that had caused. She was looking at herself all done up in a large oval mirror. She looked important and even wore lipstick. She felt her femininity in its full. They happily escorted her outside, which was filled with banners and decorations. There were musicians, flowers, and children running about. There were tables full of many foods. It was quite a wonderful feast. There were all kinds of creatures about. She greeted her mother with a hug and kiss, all things forgiven. It was more than enough to have her family back again. She saw Jin and Kai and pranced happily towards them with her curls bouncing. She curtsied. You both look so handsome. They bowed back. You look beautiful, Trillium, Kai said. She kissed their cheeks. Thank you for everything. How can I ever repay you? You already have, Jin smiled. Phariseph and his father flew in. It was good to see his wing was healed up. The crowd greeted them. When their eyes met, they were locked inside and time stood still. He came closer and kissed her hand. Miss anything? Not yet. It's time. They're taking the stage. When Nezha and Serenity took the stage, the music stopped and the crowd began to gather around and cheer. They waved at everyone. When the cheers died down, Nezha spoke. Welcome, creatures of Haven Bell. We are here to celebrate the life of Esmeralda, the late queen of the fairies, and all that we have lost. They sacrificed their lives to bring unity among us. The Dark Army has been defeated and Trimidoc has fallen. The crowd screamed and cheered. Nezha continued. The eyes returned and the temple is strong. Welcome back your queen, Serenity. Loud applause. The whole crowd bowed to her. Welcome and thank you. It is great to be back among my people. I have missed you so. We have great news. The sickness is now broken and we can begin to unite. I am very proud of all of you. Although we have lost many, their souls still surround us and we have already begun to rebuild, and quickly at that. I make an order to all the lands that other creatures be welcomed. There will be quick punishment for those who harass or inflict any harm upon another race. Elkstaff will now be the land of all creatures. Unity is what will help us, and prejudice will destroy us. We will need someone to rule this new land. Someone strong and brave. We as the council find it only fitting that we give this honor to the one who found courage when all was lost. From that bravery we were all saved. Meet the king of Elkstaff, Jack Falconberry. Everybody cheered. He was so surprised that he stood frozen. This had to be a dream. Was it real, or would he wake up the next day to be inside the cave underneath Jade's cruel eyes? Thank you, everybody. This is a great privilege. I am honored to help and guide you. But if you accept me, you must accept the woman I wish to be your queen. Nemi, come forward. She timidly stepped out of the crowd. She was nervous. She reached Jack on stage and he gave her a kiss. This just made her more nervous. He knelt down and looked in her eyes. Namara, will you marry me? She began to cry. Only if they will love and accept me despite of our pasts. Well, could you accept us? Jack asked the crowd. Nemi closed her eyes and prayed that she would not hold him back. She didn't want to be the one to hold him from this honor. The crowd cheered. She smiled and opened her teary eyes to see Jack gazing at her. Yes, she answered, and planted a huge kiss on him. They bowed and left the stage in a happy prance, holding hands. Nezha was about to speak again when alert horns began to blow. Garrett was in the air and shouted, "Ship coming! Hide the women and children!" They began to scatter. The wizards and leaders quickly armed themselves and got into formation. Kai looked over at Trillium, who held her bow steady. She looked like a princess, but was indeed a powerful warrior. "You're a badass," he stated. She smiled and gave him a quick wink before her eyes shifted back to the ship. They formed a semicircle around it. Trillium could see what looked like a human man. When the gangplank came down, Trillium gasped. What she saw was a man with a horse's body. "It's a centaur," Nezha spoke with surprise. "Well, I'll be damned," Jin commented. Trillium and her mother still held their focus. 3 of them came down the ramp, their hooves clocked on the wood. No one looked to be armed. "We are the centaur of Claran. We have been informed that the threat inside the Mountains of Shadow has been destroyed, and Trimidoc, the great dragon of fire, has perished." "Ye know of Trimidoc?" Jacia asked suspiciously. "We have seen him. He's rampaged our land before." "What are you doing here?" "We wish to form an alliance and become part of Havenbell." "You are welcome to join us," Nezha smiled and motioned the others to lower their weapons. "As leader of the temple, we will protect you. As you've noticed, the sickness is gone. We wish to accommodate all creatures. The field of Fairy Island must stay active. They must have protection at all costs." Trillium chuckled at Farisef. "Yeah, flower picker," she joked. He smiled. "Elkstaff will now be the land of all creatures. Our king and queen will be pleased, thank you. May we rest a while before going back?" "You are welcome. There is much to eat. Help yourselves." They bowed with their horse legs and began to slowly come out onto the land. "It's okay. Everyone return," Garrett sang and patted his drum. Everyone returned to the celebration. The kids went crazy and were the least scared to gather around these creatures, which they only knew as a rumor. A winged horse appeared in the sky, and the children, along with the centaur, gazed in wonder at it. He landed, and Duran dismounted. He led his horse to Ivory, and they whinnied and nuzzled like old companions. An elven boy took them and led them up to a more peaceful place. Duran took the stage. "Trillium, child of harmony, I ask you to join me in my quest to travel with the spirit warriors." The crowd awed. "Have you made your decision?" She came onto the stage. "Yes, I have decided. My time in Havenbell has been well spent. The Dark Ones are gone along with the sickness. I have been reunited with my mother and grandmother. The temple is strong once again. I have decided that helping our spirit warriors would be a chance I cannot decline. I will miss you all very much, but I feel my journey is far from over. Welcome the Drakens, Jin and Kai. Please show them kindness. I urge you to love each other, believe in peace, and believe in harmony. Thank you." She curtsied and the crowd hailed her. They all applauded, except for Farisef. "Hey," Jin called, "what about us? What are we going to do?" "You are going to be put into training to become wizards of the temple. You may choose to live wherever you wish. If you wish to return home, we will do all that we can do to get you back in," Nezha offered. "Did you hear that?" Jin asked his friend. "If we go home, we cannot be wizards." "Oh well, I really like it here. I've seen so many things I never thought were real." "I feel the same. Let's stay." "Thank you." "So it is done," Nezha finished. The crowd cheered and the music started again. The games continued. Trillium gave her love and said her goodbyes. She congratulated Jack and Nemi and approached her guardians. "You two will make great wizards, and one day I wish to return and join you." "We can't wait either. We will miss you, and be safe." Kai bowed. "See you soon." Jin bowed as well. "Yes, good journey." She smiled and hugged them farewell. She had grown to really like the two of them. "Trillium!" she heard a very small voice yell in her mind. Then he yelled again. She turned around. She ran to the shore where her brother's head peeked out from the water. "Seed!" She sent her thoughts to him. "You are so brave." So are you, sister. Those new weapons were great. I fought with all I had. I guess I can't stop you from being a warrior because that's what you truly are. When are you coming back, sister? I don't know, but I promise I will someday. I wish you didn't have to go, but you're so lucky. I'm sorry about Father. I tried, but it was too late. It's okay. You couldn't help it. I will miss him very much. It really hurts, you know, but Serenity is right. Huh? His spirit will always be a part of us. I love you, Zeed. I love you too, sister, and good luck. She found Farisef and sat down next to him. He seemed cold and empty. I'm sorry, Farisef. You understand, don't you? I understand too well. I knew that loving you was wrong. No, it wasn't. There are no mistakes in love. You are right, wise prince. I will keep in touch, and I shall not forget you. She kissed him, which made it even harder to say goodbye. This kiss was remembered often by the two of them. They rejoined the rest, still holding hands. Ready? Daron asked in his wise voice. She nodded. They are coming, see. He pointed to the water where the shape of a woman was forming. She was a spirit, solid but translucent. Her hair was a wave of blue that floated even above the water. Another came out of the trees, one from the air and one from the great bonfire. All of the elements were here. 4 more joined their circle, all of them male. Who are they? The seasons. No one could believe his or her eyes. They actually existed. To see one in your lifetime was a blessing, but to see them all but one that is, was unbelievable. Everyone was silent. Where's the leader, the Rainbow Warrior? She is who we are going to meet. You are now a guardian of the Spirit Warriors. She only reveals herself to those she trusts, which is few. The spirits gathered around them, and Daron and Trillium waved goodbye to the crowd. They walked with them, with their winged horses, into the woods, and they all disappeared. Farisef watched her, soaking in every detail of her face. He wanted to remember everything in fear that he should never see her again. After this, she sent him messages once in a while to tell him she was all right. He had a couple girlfriends but refused to marry despite of his father's disapproval. Deep down, Jonathan knew why his son would not settle. 2 summers later, a winged horse appeared in the sky above Josephera. When Ivory landed, Trillium jumped off in a flash and ran as fast as she could into the palace. With no care for being unprofessional, she burst into the throne room, startling everyone there. Farisef jumped up and stared at her in disbelief. She ran towards him, and he embraced her fully, taking her feet off from the ground as he spun her around. He never wanted to let go, as if the wind would come and take her away at any moment. What took you so long? When he held her face to look in her eyes, she was crying. I have so much to tell you, but right now your love is all I want. 2 weeks later, they were married in Elkstaff. It seemed like the perfect place for their marriage, and everyone accepted them. Jack and Nimmy welcomed them. It was beautiful and grand. All of their friends, family, and close companions came. Many creatures of all kinds gathered in the pavilion. Jin and Kai gave her away in her father's place. The warriors from Drake had lived in Fathia for about a month, but felt awkward, so they sailed to Elkstaff, where they felt welcomed and equal. They were both now accomplished wizards. Trillium had finished her mission with Daron, and now all of Havenbell was united and complete for the first time since the split. Drake had taken the longest. Even though they still chose to remain mostly separate, in fear of losing their culture to a new one, they had at least made an alliance and had a member that came to council meetings. Trillium could now have the life she always wanted. Her worst fear was waking up in Maylene all alone, having this all be a dream. She spent much more time in the Adrella Sea, but she lived in Josephera and sometimes Fathia. She never spent one night without waking up to Farisef. She and Havenbell had now found peace and unity. Trillium, at long last, was home. And that's the end of my first book, The Wizards of Havenbell 1, The Child of Harmony, written by Allison Hunt. The first book took me about 6 years. I had 2 years of writer's block. Well, let me read you the afterword, and then I'll just talk about stuff real quick before we go to the next book. Thank you for making it this far. I hope you move right on to the next because things really heat up from here on out. My father used to take me with him fishing all the time growing up. He took me to Merwin Dams many times. There's a path that leads to a waterfall. One day I walked down it by myself and started to run. Hence, Trillium the elf was born. My true hero in the story is Mutt. Right when he grabbed Trillium's bow, did you notice that Jack turned back into Mutt right then? Full of fear, and fear destroys strength. He makes me the most proud. Nothing can be passed through dreams. Duran brought Trillium the stones in the maze. Oh, and that imp creature? He is what happens if a small fairy drinks the brew. He was killed with Lar in the Adrella Sea. Then there's Duran's reveal. We know who he is now, but we don't truly know what he is, and you will learn a lot more about Duran Alasius in the future. What if Trillium and Farisef's child finds a journal about Trillium's quest? And what if she may be hiding something from the council? This too shall be revealed. There's a very dangerous man you will meet, and anyone who can control him will be capable of many things indeed. There are many great adventures to come, and many new creatures to meet. There are more secrets, battles, and romance to see. The Scepter of Zane and Ezrah are my favorites. You ain't seen nothing yet. There is a storm brewing, and it involves the book, the owl, and the girl. Sincerely, Allison Hunt. So the first book is not my favorite. It's my introduction. It's really detailed. I talk about the sky and the trees and all this stuff, and I describe what all the lands and all the creatures, and it's. I don't like it because I think it's too full of details, but it's kind of a necessity to get you into the series. So now I don't have to go blah blah blah. Now it just everything picks up and it turns more into a screenplay. There are good things. Each of these books have a completely different aura, even though they're all connected. You don't want to read them out of order because it's just not going to work out the same for you. One of my friends likes the first one the best because it is more gothic. It's more bloodthirsty. There's, people cutting each other's heads off, and there's a lot of battles. It is darker. My daughter says it's kind of scary, and it is the scariest one, I will admit. But I kind of like what happens from here on out. The story gets so much thicker, and the Scepter of Zane is absolutely my favorite. It's just the glue. There's so much stuff picks up. It's not a hard read. I think it's a lot more entertaining than the first one. The first one, I think, but it's not boring. So I can see how I think it's boring and over detailed and too slow. And a lot of people get stuck trying to read it because it's just blah, blah, blah. And so they don't make it to Scepter. Well, Scepter's awesome. Ezrah goes out with a bang. Ezra's the funniest. So anyway, doing these tapes as the writer is difficult. I don't want to give I'm a very tricky writer. I have everything set up potentially to distract you, to throw you off. Little things happen, and you unless you read the series twice, you're not going to catch a lot of things. I did these things so that if you did happen to go back and listen or read them again, shit is really going to make a lot more sense to you. Things that happen. So I'm tricky. So I might let you know, I might tip you off to a few minor things, but I'm definitely not going to ruin any of the surprise. That's what makes being a writer so fun. I know everything that's going to happen. You don't have a clue, and I set this all up for your enjoyment. So I hope you like the rest of my series. This next one is my favorite. So enjoy the Scepter of Zane, and thank you.